Uh, Good evening, everybody. So, in today's session, we would be covering the following agenda. We would be looking at two other non-functional requirements, which are customization, maintainability, and modifiability. After that, we would be discussing about a framework-based approach for building applications, what it brings to the table, and what are the pitfalls if you do not follow that approach. Following which, we'll also be talking about few of the case studies which have few of the projects which has taken a framework based approach and have become successful. So we'll begin with the non-functional requirements now. Customization is a key aspect of an application or a product, and especially if it has to cater to the need of multiple customers. For example, take an on-premise product or a SaaS-based product. If it has to be deployed for multiple customers, the need is that each of the customer require different set of business rules, workflow, the data that they capture. So what happens eventually is you end up having a lot of source code in order to bring in those requirements, and it leads to a lot of maintenance effort and then hence lowers the productivity as well. So we need to bear in mind that when we build applications or products, we keep the configurability aspects of the application in mind so that it's pretty much easier to cater to different requirements rather than going and modifying it in the code. So we look at what are the different customizations that are even possible in an application. To begin with, the most important or most common customization is to deal with view level customization. So one thing that every customer would have in fact requested an ISV, or if you're providing an application for multiple customers, the customers might have asked you is to provide white labeling, right? The theme and logo of your application needs to match the theme and logo of the end customer. This is one common requirement, and it's in order to achieve it, there are lots of theme frameworks that are available directly from technologies like .NET or Java, and if not, you could build a theme framework and build in the automatic customization capability here. So you might have a metadata stored for each of the customer and render the theme and the logo based on the metadata. So this is one common requirement, and to handle it, it's a simple metadata storage and simple framework is necessary in order to handle such a requirement. So the next common requirement is to have different kind of data capture for each of the customer, right? So when you develop with certain basic fields in mind for an entity, let's say. And let's take an entity called employee. Say you have 5 fields for that entity, and if you are deploying the application to 2 different customers, customer A could ask for 3 more fields and customer B could ask for 3 more fields. One way that normally people handle is to go and add all the 6 additional fields to the basic entity and have like they write an implementation code of if else to differentiate if it's from customer A or customer B and then do it. So this is fine for 2 customers, but if you take the same solution to multiple customers, your code becomes pretty much non-manageable in very short time. So the approach you need to do is to bring in the data field customization, which allows the entity itself to be extended runtime by the business user. So imagine you give the privilege to the customer administrator to be able to add more fields to an entity at a runtime. So if you want to bring in such a feature, so you have different approaches available in front of you, right? One approach is to go for a flat table, which is like you have an entity called employee. You have another table called employee extension having some random columns like column 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And you have a metadata column which says for customer A, column 1 means maybe a social security number, column 2 means his age, and so on. Similarly, the metadata information for customer B could also be maintained. So during runtime, what happens is the metadata for these columns are taken to figure out which customer has got what columns and what data are stored, and then it's combined with the main table and presented back. So this is one common approach you could follow to store extension fields or to bring dynamism to your entity, to your entities. The advantage of this is it's better in performance because you could introduce indexes quite easily, and the search can be specific to the type of the column and so on. But the downside of it is you are limited by the number of additional columns that you could bring to the entity. But so if you are very clear on the number of extensions that you might support for an entity, or if you could draw a boundary on the number of extensions that you are going to support, flat table approach is a better one to follow. The other approach is to go for a key value pair. In this mode, all the columns and values are stored as key and value. So if for the same example, for customer A, you could have columns like social security number and age as key, and the respective value as values in different rows. So row 1 is going to have column social security number and its value. The row 2 is going to have the age and its value. Now the advantage of this approach is it offers great scalability, or it does not have any constraint or limit on the number of extension fields that you can introduce. The downside is if you are offering a search based on the additional fields you are adding, then it becomes a little cumbersome, and the search itself might be slower because it's not possible to index it very well and so on. So these are two common approaches people follow to bring in customization at a data field or an entity level. The other customization that you would also require is to be able to manage the core fields in your forms or grids. Right? Assume you have 10 fields that are embedded in your form or grid. There could be a situation where customer A would want to call these fields differently. For example, the display name of these fields should be different from customer A to customer B, right? In this case, you can go in for a feature called data view customization, wherein all the display names or the taxonomy of the customer can be maintained as metadata, and then you could render it. And just not the taxonomy, you could also have requirements that customer A would not want to have to field A and B mandatory, but customer B would want. In this case, again, you can go in for a metadata based approach where the fields and the attributes of the fields, like the visibility of it, the order of it, and all these can be pretty much maintained as metadata, and while rendering, this could be combined with the form and grid to finally show to the customer. So this is again a very useful feature you could utilize to bring in the configuration for different customers. Other challenge when you're dealing with configurability is to deal with different business rules. Uh, Imagine a scenario where you're calculating leaves in an employee management system. The rule or the logic of calculation of leave is going to be definitely different from one organization to another organization. If you have to achieve both of these in a single code base, the one and only way you're going to be able to achieve is to have an if-else condition segregating different customers and doing it. Now that is going to become cumbersome, and hence if you have such a need, a better approach to go for is to adopt business rule customization. So in this feature, what you would do is give the ability for the end user to completely define parameters and maybe the mathematical calculations itself for the leave calculation, and that would be stored as a metadata which would be picked up by the business rule engine and run. So this feature is very necessary in addition to the data fields and data view customization, because without these it's not possible even to do any business logic with the added additional fields that we have added during if a business user comes and add any additional fields that we have introduced as a part of customization. So business rule customization again could be a complete unit or a component that you build at a framework level, and it would definitely have two parts to it: an end user editor portion where a business user can come and devise a rule or compose a rule, and then an engine which executes this rule, which is more consumed by the developer. In addition to the business rule, there are systems which would also need workflows to be customized. We'll again take the example of an employee management system. Now, when an employee is added or when an employee is discontinued, the workflow or the steps that has to be taken could be quite different from an organization to another organization. So if you need to cater to these two requirements, you need to be able to customize the workflow itself. Now, some of the workflows could be purely development centric, right? But it is advisable to give the ability to your business user to go and modify the workflow steps and so on, so that you do not keep creating multiple workflows in your code. So what has to be done here is to have a workflow metadata that typically represents the different steps and the way the workflow has to be processed. The workflow metadata itself can be defined by the end user, and you will have a workflow engine which picks up this metadata and runs. So a combination of a business rule customization, workflow customization, data view customization, and a field customization makes your product quite powerful, and you could have a single code base and achieve different requirements that could lead to a lot of that could lead to a manageable and maintainable code base on a long term. So with that, we'll move on to maintainability and modifiability. Once a product is built and out to the market, what's more important is to be able to find any issues, be able to troubleshoot the product itself very quickly. So that's about maintainability. Maintainability is about how faster or how easier is it to maintain your code base, right? One important aspect that you will have to keep in mind for your code to be maintainable is to have proper instrumentation. The proper instrumentation can help in troubleshooting very faster. So the common practices that are taken to have a better troubleshooting mechanism is to instrument enough data. So you need to have a proper instrumentation strategy which says what are the data that are going to be instrumented. It's just not an exception stack trace that is going to be enough. The data that led to the error should also be captured. Proper use of exceptions need to be in place. Have error handlers for specific type of errors. Not all errors have to go to the database. Not all errors need to go to event logs. So properly categorize your error types, and based on the error types, you could have different error handling strategy. You could also devise strategies like if there are certain errors logged in your system, you should notify so and so people. So if you have, for example, showstoppers, you could, with severity very high, you could have an error handler that reports back the error using a notification to concerned people. So that could be an error handling strategy itself. And also properly devise where you are logging and have searchable logs. The formats of the error has to be proper. Use DB in case you are expecting to analyze the instrumentation data. And also it's not just enough to instrument errors. If you are dealing with a system which has to provide a lot of high-end performance, then it's important to instrument performance-related data also. So instrumentation is the key for troubleshooting both error scenarios as well as performance scenarios. Coming to modifiability, once a code is written, it's definitely going to go through a lot of changes in terms of the change in business, change in functionality, and so on. So it's extremely important to write modifiable code. Otherwise, from a long-term perspective, changes that are going to be brought into the system are going to become extremely difficult. So in order for your code to be maintainable, these are the patterns that you can follow. Split the systems into subsystems. Instead of having a single monolithic system, please split this system into proper subsystem and make it modular. Draw the boundary of the modules very clearly. Adopt a framework-based approach. We'll be, in the later half of the session, we'll also be covering what a framework is and how it helps bringing quality to your application. Do not repeat code. Go for a centralized routine wherever you have a common need. Use high cohesion and low coupling. Adopt an object-oriented programming approach because that brings in a lot of maintainability. Use interface-based design, and this is a common practice that you could follow. Have implementations outside and always depend on interfaces to communicate between two modules or two classes, so that changes in one place does not affect the change on the other classes. Use abstraction wherever the implementation could undergo changes. Adopt MVC architecture. So architectures like MVC helps a great deal in separation of concern. Adopt service-oriented architecture. If service-oriented architecture inherently brings reusability within an enterprise, you don't have to reinvent logic in a lot of different places. Hence, adopt SOA-based architecture. Adopt inversion of control pattern and AOP for common tasks. For example, AOP can be used wherever you are instrumenting, wherever you are catching exceptions, and so on. Adopt patterns like chain of responsibility, command pattern, and unit of work pattern, which splits a single monolithic task to multiple subtasks and perform. Again, from coding practices, keep the code simple, have sufficient commenting, use proper naming standards, write testable code, and it's very important that we write testable code because it's easy to unit test, and have mock objects wherever required. Restrict the number of lines to lesser than 50. Take static messages outside and make it configurable, because one common requirement or one common change that happens in a product is for the display messages to be different, right? So it's better that we have that outside externalized so that the code needs not be touched every time. And monitor and properly tune and maintain cyclometric complexity. Do not hard code static values. Have either a configuration or use constants for that. So that's on maintainability and modifiability. With that, I hand it over to Janaki Raman.
Thank you, Jyoti. Okay, let's try to understand some of the importance of the framework in the first place, and what happens when you don't have a framework. Now, in the absence of a framework, the typical problems that one could foresee are the developers, they are kind of left hanging because they don't know where to get started. So one common pitfall that projects do is that they try to mingle all this together and try to have the developers come up with a design for all these solutions. But there is a big difference when you want to design for a functional requirement versus when you want to design it for a highly scalable and configurable non-functional requirement. So the approaches are very different here. So what happens, developers end up tackling this problem at a code level instead of at a design level. And of course, the developers have their own priorities, so they try to kind of address it at a different level. And you also end up having the business functionality spread across all the layers. So instead of taking the layered approach, everybody tries to solve it in the way that they know, and hence you end up having a code which is like totally messed up. So those are some of the problems, and also with respect to the steps involved, like I said, they may not be able to know where to start and where to end. So that again kind of leaves them in a no man's land. And technology, while it has so many options, it's also a problem because then the developers are left with too many choices to decide as to which ones they should adopt and which ones they don't adopt. So individual preferences comes into picture, and then the overall project kind of gets again into an inconsistent state. Developers, as you know, they are always under time pressure. Projects are under time pressure. So stepping back and thinking how to solve something in a generic way or in the right way, seeing it from a holistic perspective, is something that is very difficult from their perspective, given the time constraint and the project pressures in hand. And the developers, as I said, everybody has their own level of knowledge, so everybody tries to solve the same problem in their own version of it. So reinventing the same wheel, scenarios like that keeps happening, and the efforts also get duplicated. So overall, from a project management perspective, if you look at one, right from estimation, because many times the estimation goes wrong not because of the functionality that is spelled out in the document, but rather the implicit requirements that are not spelled out in the document. So like NFR as an example. So the effort duplication and the estimation, incorrect estimation, all might lead to delays in the project and adds up to the risks within the project. And also in the absence of a framework, it's going to be extremely difficult to maintain applications. So we have seen legacy maintenance of applications being done by a large set of teams. The primary reason being that there is no standard way of interpreting those applications, no standard way of controlling or changing things. So even when you want to do a small change, for example, the way you deal with security or the way you deal with a certain implementation, then you have to kind of do it across the product in several places. So you need to first find out which all places have to be changed, because if you miss out one place, then again that's going to be an issue from a quality perspective. So you spend a lot of time in managing the change rather than implementing the change itself. So what is a framework? A framework is a reusable software platform which can be used to develop several applications, products and solutions. And they are designed to facilitate the development process by allowing the designers, which is the architects, to design the solution from a holistic perspective and then allow the programmers to consume that design and try to build their solutions using that. So in essence, it allows the developers to focus really on their core job, which is developing the functionality, rather than trying to work on this value-added set of things. So what are the advantages from a framework perspective? So one, to summarize, focus on the business value, freeing up organizations from supporting high cost and custom solutions. That's one big advantage. And since you are going to be more focused on developing the functionality, you will be reaching the market much faster time to market, and the time required to implement the solution itself is going to be less because you already have the base in place. Also, rapid and easy implementation, which could be the reduced initial project implementation requirements, and reusability of the code that has been already pre-built and pre-tested. So when you go for a framework approach, you already have that code available, the framework available and taking care of most of the things. So you could take it up as it is. You need not, it's already proven, time tested, so you don't have to worry about dealing with the framework, but rather the functionality. And more importantly, you can establish good programming practices, establish consistency and standardization across the organization. Like if you're planning to build silos of applications, for example, enterprise planning to build, sometimes enterprises build like 10s and 20s of applications. So when you have a framework as the base, and then you start building silos of application on top of it, controlling these applications becomes much easier. And entire silos, the 20 or 30, 40 applications can be embedded on the same platform, which means controlling them, access perspective, settings perspective, everything becomes much easier. And the overall cost is also pretty lowered with a minimized risk in place. So we did also see this slide in the initial first session. So basically the commonality of requirements between the disparate applications, right? So as we saw, the domain requirement of course is going to be different, but then other than that, the adjoining requirements, which is the user management, security access control, and the runtime quality requirements like performance, response time of the system, and the maintainability of the application itself down the line, how easy it is to change things and maintain, right? So those three things, there is a huge percentage of overlapping between the requirements from one product to another product, between applications. So what we are trying to do here is, from a framework perspective, trying to package or bundle these three together in such a way that all the applications and products can leverage these requirements and can make use of it. So the advantages in this case are primarily around one, the technology standardization. So you set across the technology stack for your own IT or the product, so that it's not left to the developers or for the individual to decide whether I should use a Silverlight or whether I should use an MVC. So everything is now set. You don't have to really break your head in seeing what is good or bad. So technology standardization is one big advantage. Of course, the decrease in cost can be achieved because you're not trying to do the same things again and again. You're saving cost. And then you also have developers who are trained on this framework, which means they get to know how to consume this framework and how to build solutions on top of it. And tested and proved framework is always better from a project management perspective, from reducing the technical risks involved in completing the project successfully. So this is a typical SaaS framework. So this is more from a reference perspective we have given, which could give you an idea of the various kind of things that a framework should contain. So there are different flavors of this framework, and what we have taken is a SaaS framework for this example, because we also talked about multi-tenancy and few other things. So primarily three things that constitute the framework. One, the plumbing stack itself, which provides all the basic plumbing layers, like distributed caching, or the way you handle exceptions, how you keep track of logging, audit trail kind of functionalities. So these are small in nature, but then are very important, because these put together provides you the base standards that will have to be put in place. And then on the engineering stack, you might have a set of components, libraries, a set of features, which all are controlled under the multi-tenancy context. So you may have multi-tenancy support, and within multi-tenancy you may also support hierarchical tenant, and you might support various tenant configuration settings, templates, and also the customizability aspect of it, because each of these modules can be further customized, can be further tweaked as to how it should work for a given tenant. So the customizability settings will also have to be applicable. So some of the key modules that could really be useful, particularly in the SaaS framework kind of scenario. One is a business rule builder. Like we saw, like Judy mentioned, there are scenarios where you'll have to write different pieces of code for different clients, and instead of writing it with a simple if condition or trying to maintain multiple versions of the code, multiple pages, multiple libraries, a business rule kind of module will allow you to define these various business logic against a particular tenant, and you can tag them with a certain name. For example, sales commission could be one business rule. So you can go ahead and define how the sales commission should be calculated, and this is done and stored at a tenant specific level. So which means you have a very nice way to go ahead and define all these varying business rules or logics through a nice editor, an intuitive editor, which also means that it need not be the technical person who is going to be doing these changes, but instead a business user, or say in level 1 kind of a non-technical user, can also go ahead and use this UI and change it according to the request from the user. So in essence, if you could imagine, it again saves a lot of time from a developer perspective. They need not worry about it. So where they want to calculate this sales commission, all they have to do is invoke this business rule called sales commission, and then the rest of the things automatically gets calculated depending on the settings that are done for that particular tenant. So similarly, workflow is one another module where you want to orchestrate a series of tasks, and the tasks could either be automated tasks or manual intervention tasks. So it could be a simple leave management approval system, purchase order approval. We are not talking about complete BPM here, but just the workflow part of it. BPM is much more a bigger product in the first place. So workflow, trying to help you from a multi-tenancy perspective, can define multiple steps or various different steps for different tenants, so that you can again address their varying requirements in a much more organized way. The query and report builder could be another handy module which could be leveraged to create ad hoc reports. So your product might already contain a set of out-of-box reports predefined, but then there is also this need for customers to on the fly generate some data, right? Depending on whatever their need arises, suddenly they may want to put together a different combination of data, and they want to take a report out of it. So usually it comes to the implementation, the support team to get to be processed, but then having this module available kind of self-services the customer, so they can go ahead and directly create reports out of it. Configurable UI, we saw the need for having a custom field kind of scenario where one customer might want to add extra fields to an existing entity, and another customer might want to remove some of the core fields that are already in the product. So configurable UI provides you that advantage. So there are several such modules that are possible. So you're just touching basing the important ones. Roles and right management, user management, again, combination of it allowing you to define the granular level of security settings that are applicable for a user. And some interesting modules like data scope management could also be useful, where the accessibility of the data is not just controlled by the settings of the permissions, but also the relationship of the user against the data. A simple example could be a manager should be able to approve the leaves, but then he should be able to approve leaves only for those employees that are reporting to the manager. So we are talking about not just the permission of approving leave, but then approving it only on certain records. And the records here are determined by a certain relationship with the current user who is operating it. So in this case, the manager, when he logs in, should be able to operate this particular action only on the records that satisfy the given relationship. So this kind of scenario could be dealt in a number of ways. So it could be manager, or it could be, for example, peers. When I do a 360 degree feedback, I should be able to rate only my peers, and I cannot rate my superiors, for example. This is another example. So there could be so many combinations that can come in, but then again, all of this, if you think through, reduces the complexity from a developer perspective. So developers need not break through their head, and it's already done, available, and ready to be used. So the engineering stack contains mostly of this items of this nature, and then you have the SaaS operational components, which deals with managing the SaaS product, right? Managing from an operational perspective. So you have things like tenant provisioning, where you can manage your tenants, add new tenants, and set their access control, create the packages that are required for them. Packages determine what modules are available, what features are available for a given tenant, and you could also have authentication related modules which will determine how the authentication should happen. That a single sign-on should be the way of authentication. And you can also have licensing and metering services, which will define the accessibility and usage of the product or application by the tenants, and the set of configuration services. So this is a guideline of what a typical SaaS framework contains, and in each one can expand to a greater extent. But then again, depending on how much you need for your product, you will have to go ahead and design it or adopt a framework that has these features in the first place. So with that, we'll quickly move into the case studies section. We have lined up 2 case studies today. So just to give you 2 different flavors, we picked up one migration case study, and then another one a new product development. So let's first look at the migration case study. So this is from a customer called InVision. So InVision is a customer based out of Germany, and they are one of the leading software providers in the workforce management. So their product is used to manage large workforces, keeping track of the tasks and keeping track of the time, and typical workforce related features, management features. Now this customer was in the process of moving to the cloud computing model. So they want to get rid of the initial investment of hardware and software which their customers have to make, and also reduce their implementation time drastically. That way they can roll out the product much faster to their customers, and be able to also target the small and medium segments of customers. So in short, they want to build a very high configurable multi-tenant SaaS solution in order to achieve these goals. And after their own analysis of the various options they have and the various maturity models that are in place, so they decided to take a 2-phased approach. The first phase targeting maturity level 2, where they would want to have their solution standardized. So there is a single code which kind of services all the tenants, but then it might be replicated. So each customer may have their own copy of the instance running, and then it serves that particular customer. However, the customization or implementation is done in a configurable way instead of any hard coding. The second phase is about moving. Now the first phase will allow them to move to a SaaS model at least quickly. So it's like a stepping stone, so that they can start getting customers on board on the new SaaS model. While they do that, parallelly they can start the phase 2, which involves moving module by module into a maturity model level 4, where they convert the modules to multi-tenant and then bring in more configurability into the product. And in order to achieve the migration or the phase 2, which is moving to maturity level 4, they were in the process of looking out for a multi-tenant SaaS framework which could make their job much easier, so that they can easily move the product from level 2 to a level 4 kind of a scenario. And it could also serve as their engineering foundation for some of their other products. So, when Innovation came to know about Excello, they were already in the process of building their own framework, and an elaborate evaluation exercise also happened with Excello. They evaluated the framework and looked at various aspects in it. So they finally decided to do a small POC to determine how much of it is applicable for them and how much of it can really benefit their project. And as part of the POC, there was also a rigorous performance benchmarking effort that went in to ensure that the huge workload, workforce management is being able to actually handled by the framework. So, as an outcome of the POC mission, they was able to make a decision that the framework that they came across was useful, and they decided to go ahead using CelloSaaS framework instead of developing everything from scratch at their end, because they don't want to reinvent the same wheel again and again. So they went ahead and had close to around 30 developers to work on this project, and we kind of helped them in terms of doing an online training program to get used to the framework, because the developers are new to the multi-tenant part of it, and they want to know how to utilize these various APIs and various modules. So the training program helped them in terms of getting up to speed, and they were able to quickly move to the level 2, the phase 1, which is maturity model level 2, where the Amazon instances were used to serve each of the customers. And as they were working on it, they also worked on the building a central server, which kind of formed as the central authentication and redirection server, where the tenants are created, registered, and all the settings related to the tenant are maintained in that central server. And then once they get authenticated, they are redirected to the appropriate instance that serves that particular customer. So this is the pictorial representation of that. So the central application instance had the user privilege, tenant data, and also all the services which can be consumed by these various instances, and the routing services pointing to the appropriate instance. So when the tenant logs in, they get authenticated, and their appropriate settings are passed on to the instance, and that respective instance starts serving that tenant. So that was the first case study. The second was another case study. As I said, it comes from the category of new product development. So Sequoia was a US-based firm that was dealing with the benefit administration services. So they process more than like 60 million records for eligibility verification, and they deal with close to around 700 million in healthcare premiums, and overall they manage close to around 450 vendor and carrier relationships. So Sequoia had a need to replace their existing benefit administration management system. So it's basically a service that they offer to their end customers, and the system itself is used to deliver the service. So it's not exactly a product which is being used by the end user as it is, but then it's a suite of product, a platform that they have, which is used by several people, several stakeholders, right from end customer, end organization, end user, which could be the employees of the organization, and it's also used by the comps, which could be people on the phone. So, for example, if I want to make my own selection of benefits I want to claim, I can even make a phone call to a representative, and then the representative can do it on behalf of me, can make the changes on the platform. So the overall process is collecting and consolidating this various benefit data, setting data from the employees, and then consolidate and send it back to the parent organization, and the organization HR system consumes this information to finally identify how much should be deducted and how much should be passed on as benefit to the employee. So the current system they had multiple issues. One, it was pretty old system. It was built a long time ago, and hence it was not able to scale up. And it was also done in different points in time. So there were different technologies that were put in place, and there was duplication of functionality happening all through the years. And different places, the same logic gets repeated. So when your business process changes, then you have to go and repeat it in multiple places. And one of the biggest bottlenecks they had was the scalability issue, where they were not able to scale beyond 300 concurrent users. And as this customer was approaching very large end user organizations, and given the fact that some of this benefit administration happens on a certain period or a certain point in time, for example, like we have our appraisal system sometime in March, April, so the benefit administration also happens at a certain point in time over a year, which means during that 4 weeks or 5 weeks, the entire the employees supported in the system are going to be logging in or accessing the system to specify their own benefit administration. So the peak load during the 4-5 weeks period is going to be extremely high. So the system should be able to support that load, while the rest of the year it's not going to be that high, but still this one peak load has to be supported. So they were expecting it to go as much as from 300 concurrent users to almost 3,000 to 4,000 concurrent users. That's like a 10x straight jump from what they are currently handling. And also, since many of the processes are done through backend, so they write small utilities, and there are a lot of small applications that are developed. So it was not done in an orchestrated manner. So it was all done in bits and pieces. And the biggest problem, bigger problem was the inconsistency in terms of the rules that they have to create for various customers. So like I mentioned, being benefit administration, the policy or the formula for calculating, say, what is my dental benefit could completely vary from one organization to another organization, right? And also the criteria that you may set for a certain eligibility. For example, I can say employee should be greater than 30 and should be grade A or B, and should have been within the company for more than 5 years. So this could be a combination of criteria which can determine whether somebody is allowed for a dental plan. So like this, the other company may give their own set of criteria. So you end up supporting multiple rules for multiple customers, and sometimes within the same customer you will have to deal with multiple rules for various segments of people. So the rules processing was one of the most complex tasks and most error prone also, because all these rules were processed manually by writing some utilities. So it was creating a lot of issues from an error perspective. So Aspire was involved with this customer in terms of putting together the new platform in place which could help them address all the challenges we saw. And they proposed Texelo's Celosas framework as a platform which they can use as a launching bed and start building the silos of services that they are planning to do. So a set of BAs and TAs, tech arts and business analysts formed together to discuss on the outlining the NFRs and the high-level goals of the application. And the entire requirements were conceptualized over a period of 5 months. And after going through analyzing the various features that are available in the framework and the features required for the product, we concluded that the framework is going to be saving them almost 30% of their time and cost, and there are like almost 100% match in the NFRs whatever they outlined. And given that it's a time-tested solution, they were also ready to go ahead. So a 20 people team was put on developing this product. We are completely trained and equipped with the framework knowledge to work on this application. So some of the key aspects on the solution front, the tenant management part, like we saw on the SaaS operations front, they are able to use it straight out of the box. They don't have to develop that functionality. Package management to determine which customers get what services can also be done straight out of the box. And then supporting this granular level of security. So in some companies they have n level of hierarchy, in some companies the hierarchies are less. So you should be able to specify granular level of control, saying this particular user, this particular role cannot do this operation, can see this kind of data. So the security framework that was available in the Cello SaaS was able to meet that requirement very well. The tenant hierarchy came into picture to address large customers where the policies itself may differ from region to region. So they may have one leave calculation policy or a benefit policy for US and another benefit policy for UK. So it will completely vary within the same tenant. So tenant hierarchy was able to meet that requirement by representing each geography as a tenant. So there were close to 4-5 silos of applications that were built using the platform using the framework as the platform itself. So this is an outcome of the project itself. So earlier it used to be only technical persons who are dealing with the domain as well, being able to change this, do system level changes, but then now the domain expert can just go use the administration screens and change it by themselves. And then configuring new clients took almost 3 months, primarily because of the manual effort required in preparing small utilities, as well as due to the nature of work, it's highly error prone, so it goes into rework and then cycles of rework. So all of that leading to almost 3 months. But then with the new system completely automated, it took almost 3 days to configure a new client. So it's almost from 3 months to 3 days. And the old system, manual configuration of the business process was involved, and then very complex and disparate rules. Each customer, the way it was handled was different, and then there was a heavy dependence on direct backend updates. So a lot of changes were done on the backend itself, which is leading to manageability issues. So with the new system in place, they're able to uniformly address these things. Many of the things are templatized, so you don't have to do it differently. And because of the various models available, the dependency on the IT team as well as for any backend updates was totally removed. And even an operational manager with less technical skills can go ahead and handle the system without any further support. So that's all we had for today's session. So feel free to post your questions on the questions panel. We have time to take a few questions. Okay, we have one question from Deepak Sharma. So please guide me regarding apps developed in outdated development environment like VB6 and how to maintain or upgrade. So one thing we need to be clear here is that are you in a maintenance mode or are you planning to further enhance it? So when you say, you already mentioned that it is outdated technology, and in fact the support for VB6 has also been withdrawn. So the bigger question to ask is, do you want to continue sunsetting that application and you're just going to maintain it? In which case there's nothing much to be done. But then the event that you are planning to enhance it further and you want to continue it down the line, then I would strongly recommend you to do a complete architectural update, um, as part of which you might also want to consider moving it into an internet-based working, because now most of the systems are available as internet-based, whether it's on-premise or a cloud-based system, but uh, accessible through browser is kind of something that is most people desired way of using the application. So that could be one suggestion, and also considering the newer technologies and trends like multi-tenancy and the scalability and configurability can all be brought into this new architecture if you are planning to redevelop it. And particularly when you are moving to a newer architecture, you could also make use of ready-made framework like Cellosas itself, which can cut down your time and you just have to spend time and migrating your functionality to the newer framework. So that could be another approach. So we have a question from Nidhi Sitya. How does the cloud support single-page applications which are based on a different framework altogether? Um, so when we say cloud, so let me be more specific here. There are different terminologies within cloud. You have something called PaaS, which is a platform as a service, where you can go ahead and develop your own solutions or applications, whether it's a single page application or a large application. You can develop it on top of the platform as a service model, and then you can start using it. There is also the IaaS side of it, where you can literally host anything that you want. So in case if you have used a framework that is either developed by yourself or is already in place, so you could leverage IaaS kind of clouds to go ahead and deploy the single page application that you are referring here within those IaaS cloud and then start accessing it. So when you say leveraging cloud, it could either be on the PaaS front or the IaaS front, depending on the benefits that you are foreseeing to have. Okay, we have got one more question from Deepak Sharma. So in my office, lots of work on Excel sheets, how to maintain or what to do to shift on DB. So when you talk about databases, again, there are plenty of choices you have in hand. And most of these databases, they also supports migration, data migration utilities. So SQL Server itself has data migration utility. SQL Express also can be used. So these utilities can be leveraged to a great extent for moving your data from Excel. And Excel being one of the Microsoft products, you have greater compatibility as well. So you could use those utilities to migrate the data. However, if you have done a lot of macro related work, then that becomes a slightly complex one. But then otherwise, if it is just the plain data that you are talking about, then it can very well be moved using these utilities.
Well, those were the only questions we had, Janki, for today. I'm very thankful to you and Jyoti for the insightful presentation. The free session series went great. I would also like to thank all our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. The recording of the session would be available on techies.com by tomorrow. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Moni, and thank you everyone for attending this